Mark, it's great to have you here in the Penthouse Suites. We really appreciate you coming up here to talk to us. We know that there's plenty of things going on here at the Charleston Conference.
Oh, yeah.
We're just glad that you're able to come by and chat. So we really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for the chance. And I was up at 6:30 this morning to do the fun run. So you're right. There's a lot of competition for for our time. So yeah, that's a favorite.
Speaking of having your time, you just finished a panel, right? You were just working on a panel entitled "The Changing Academic Book Market Landscape: What's Next?" And you guys were focusing on the dramatic changes that are going on in the book marketplace. And I'm just wondering, what do you think are the most disruptive of these changes?
Yeah, well, the most disruptive is hard to pick out or single out or identify. There's just so many changes out there. eBooks, obviously, and that trying to develop a rational market for eBooks, the way they're packaged and sold and priced to schools. The whole Amazon and the Kindle, the iPad, and potential for Google to distribute the internet as an alternate source of information, and just the challenge that presents to long-form reading in general. The secondhand book market, pretty ugly from a publisher perspective, even though it might be a benefit from the consumer perspective. Certainly the student perspective. Keyword searching, we talked some about on the panel, and whether that on the one hand makes books more discoverable, but on the other hand, does that actually lead people to read books in totality as their authors intended, or are they just going in and pulling out something like it's an encyclopedia or a database? So it's I guess a little hard to focus on any one thing. I guess my sense would be just the cultural shift away from long form reading, to my mind, as a primary source for either education or recreation, really. I mean, there's just so many options and alternative ways to get smart or have fun. So
a lot of competition.
Yeah, really. So yeah, the poor book.
Well, Mark, what technologies do we need to be aware of, and what end user preferences are telling us about the future of the book market? What do you see?
Yeah, well, that's really not my area, and I mean, it's interesting that the user experience folks, the UX folks who are out there, increasingly in libraries as well as on the publishing side, have really not done a lot of work on that user reading experience in for the ebook, sure, in the digital world. So I think it remains to be seen. There's just so much conflicting information about what students prefer, what recreational readers prefer. We love the Kindle on an airplane, we hate it on the beach, whatever. So I think you can pick whatever story you want now and focus in on that. So this panel I was just on, there was a lot of talk about discovery. I think people are, really hoping that that's a driver for usage, better systems, better discovery. But I just don't. I just don't know. I think it's probably more of a cultural and economic issue to my mind than a technological issue. So,
what do you think are the main challenges that the new technology poses for us, and the difficulty in figuring out what user preferences are? What challenges do you think are there, and on the other side, or what opportunities?
Well, one of the challenges, I think, and again, it's not my area or my comfort zone exactly, so any sensible person's going to take this with a grain of salt, but it's just evolving so quickly. So a user makes an investment in a platform or a device or whatever, only to find 6 months later, a year later, that's been superseded, or they can't get books in a Mobi format. They can only get EPUBs formatted books or whatever. I mean, it really is just not a rational marketing space yet, or a stable marketing space. So I would guess most of us as consumers and as librarians are still pretty a sea as to where, trying to pick winners and losers going forward. And I think just right now, there are just, a lot of alternatives to select from. I assume eventually, like VHS and Beta and, and then Blu-ray comes along and no one ever heard of it when we were trying to compare. Eventually some of that will be sorted out. But right now, it just, it's just the war of all against all to emerge, as a industry leader in that space. So,
I know we struggle with what format to buy, what sort of device to buy. I mean, we struggle with it all the time, because you don't want to invest tens of thousands of dollars and then come up and 2 years later it's completely been superseded. How are all these challenges impacting publishers and vendors? Was the same kind of struggle for them, or?
I'm certain. I'm certain that it is for them. Obviously, I'm on the library side, and I know it's a real challenge for libraries. I mean, it's, so an individual. I mean, it's not a big deal if a library buys a $99 device, and then only to find out, in a year now, it's, that's no longer the primary platform or the most desirable. But to try to actually school or educate or direct an entire campus of 40 or 50,000 people and say, this is the way you access content, this is the way we're making books available, and then 6 months later you're back knocking on their door going, well, now the way we're doing this is this way or that way. So just all that upheaval and change in the marketplace, extremely difficult to navigate for users. On the publisher side, I guess, they probably are at least interested in messages from the market and, trying to figure out, well, how do we best serve customers and likely buyers? So on, some of them, I'm sure, are in a position to actually drive those decisions, but I think others are trying to get coherent and cogent input and messages, and those are hard to come by. I mean, I'm sure, if you had 10 focus groups at 10 different individuals each, you just walk away with 100 bits and pieces of advice. So, I mean, I do think it's just early days still.
Right, about the long form reading. Do you think that scholarly monographs are still a viable form of scholarly communication?
I do, but I think they're one among many. Okay. I know there's a certain reverence, or we sort of, in the library world, we privilege the book, as a symbol of learnedness, and it's a part of the cultural heritage, and it has a certain reverence, and obviously the book still has a lot of value, at least in some segments of the population and for some purposes. But so does Twitter, and so do blogs, and so do video, and so do a whole lot of alternative ways that people can get educated these days, or find out about the world. And in fact, books really do drive us to history. It takes a long time to write them. It takes a long time to publish them and distribute them. They're almost always backward looking, where I can learn, about what's happening in with a downed Soviet or Russian airplane, in 10 different ways today in real time. So if I wait for a book on that, that's going to be a historical tome, and maybe, more accurate maybe, but for most of us, most of the time, currency is an issue, and books really suffer by comparison in that space.
I have actually a follow-up. Do you think open access monographs are a possibility, and would that change the dynamic a little bit?
Oh yeah, I definitely think they're a possibility, because the saleability of a book, the uptake or, of a book is declining rapidly, and that's very concerning. I just a week ago or so met with the AAUP, the University Press Board, and that's a universal concern there that libraries are buying fewer and fewer books. On the other hand, there's probably more pressure than ever on publishers to actually publish my book. There's more scholars, there's more output. You have an Asian market that's come online, and in a very big way. So they're probably getting two very different messages. We have quality research and quality scholarship we want to share in a book form. Please publish my book. And we're not so interested. We're a library, but we can't afford to do this anymore. Only 1% or 5% or 16% of our budget is committed to books now, and we're going to be pretty selective about that. So, probably not an easy time to be a publisher and be caught in the middle of that.
I know we've been noticing in our university selection that print is making a comeback. In terms of what the selectors are actually selecting, they're not, and the eBooks, which I thought would soar off into the stratosphere, have actually dropped, and it's a peculiar dynamic. I don't have any way to interpret that at this point. I wonder if it's a blip or what do you think?
Well, I probably don't think too much that's helpful. I saw there was an article in the Times just a couple of weeks ago, maybe September, about, ebook sales were down, print looked back up. That created a lot of buzz for a couple of weeks. And I think Forbes had an article going, you could, that study had so many biases because it was just looking at a segment of the market and larger publishers or whatever. So I wasn't interested enough to try to sort that out. But I guess I would say, it is hard for me to think that we're not on an upward trajectory for ebooks. Things that people can read on mobile devices, which are becoming more and more ubiquitous, and get around with them and have all this functionality of, now I'll listen to it because I'm in the car, and then when I get home I prefer to read it. Just lots and lots of benefits of that digital form of the book. So I guess I think that actually the ebook will actually emerge as the primary mode for it, but there's always fluctuation and ups and downs on a long term of the dissemination of innovation, I think is the phrase we used to use, where you have cutting edge folks and then early adopters and then the mainstream and then the laggards, that you may never get on board. So it won't go away. Definitely print won't go away. I mean, it'll always be there as an alternative, but my sense is that over time, that ebook is going to become the sort of primary mode, especially in an educational setting. I'm, less sure of that in a recreational or leisure reading setting.
So you're kind of thinking the technology will get better, because I think it was something Jim O'Donnell said this morning. The technology just isn't there yet for ebook mass adoption, at least in scholarly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, everyone complains about these platforms, and everyone, and whether it's textbooks, and students don't like them, they can't do this, they can't do that. You go, you can annotate, you can cut paste, yes, but then, the next thing I look at, I can't do any of that. So it's, I guess I do think, yes, the technology will evolve and get better, and, we can, on the library side, we'll complain endlessly that it's not all perfect today and now and all, but it's not totally useless. It's just not obviously perfected, and I imagine it will move incrementally toward higher levels of utility. Okay. So maybe that's just naive optimism about the evolution of technology and how things change, but obviously was saying earlier to that I ran this morning, and one of the guys I run with is Mitchell Davis, who's headquartered down here in North Carolina, and he's working on a reading platform that he thinks is more of a native reading experience than some of the more generic large scale platforms that are really intended for folks to read on a desktop computer. So you just know there are going to be smart people out there that are identify that problem and start working to solve it. So.